Good morning or good afternoon, and welcome to the Research Data Alliance webinar titled Identity Store and Preserve. Let me start to share my screen. So while you are starting to join us, so good afternoon, good morning for some of you, good evening maybe. Welcome to the RDA Global Adoption Week, to the webinar titled Identity Store and Preserve. We will be featuring Chris Schubert, Director of the Climate Change Center in Austria, Hervé L'Hours, Repository Preservation Manager at the UK Data Archive, and Caterina Caracciolo, Information Specialist at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN. So my name is Marieke Willems from TrustSeal, project partner of RDA Europe 4, a member of the RDA Secretariat. So I'll be moderating today's webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. We see that already 28 people have joined us now, and we're expecting a lot more to join while we are in the session. So we're very excited to engage with you on 3 adoption projects in RDA, and provide you also with the opportunity to discuss these projects with our speakers that are today with us. So prior to getting started, I'd like to review a few technical details pertaining to the webinar. So first, you'll see that you're in listen-only mode. That means that you can hear us and you can hear the speakers, but we cannot hear you. You have a question mode option in the lower part of the GoToWebinar interface, and then you can there simply type in your question, and we'll be reading them out during the Q&A, or if you lift your hands, there's also a way to do that in the interface. We will unmute you during the question and answer session after each of the presentations. So it rests me to say that we are recording the presentations, and the link to the presentations, both the link to the presentations and the recordings will be made available through the RDA channels and in a follow-up email after the webinar. So the objective of the RDA Adoption Week, so originally planned for Plenary 15, the RDA Adoption Week aims to demonstrate the wide variety of the RDA adoptable and adopted solutions to data sharing challenges that people in their field encounter in their daily jobs. So the purpose is to learn about the RDA outputs, to converse with the speakers, they are chairs and adopters, and to determine how the solutions can be adopted in your own organizations. So today, the session Identity Store and Preserve features 3 presentations, 3 adoption stories, the Scalable Dynamic Data Citation Methodology, the CCCA Subset and Dynamic Data Citation Service, presented by Chris Schubert from the CCCA. It's the Climate Change Center in Austria. The adoption story of the Social Science and Humanities Open Cloud SSHOC adoption story of the CoreTrustSeal across European social sciences and humanities repositories, brought to us by Hervé L'Hours from the UK Data Archive and CESSDA. And then the 39 hints to facilitate the use of semantics for data on agriculture and nutrition. So the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN adoption story by Caterina Caracciolo. But we also would like to know who is on the call with us, who is engaging with us here today. For that, I ask you to go to slide.do and enter the code that you see here. Let me change my screen for a second. So is this visible? Can you see this? Bridget, can you see it?
Yes, I can. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, here it says again, so slido.com and hashtag W345 will take you to this poll so that we understand who's on the call and who are we engaging with today. And so the first question is, what is your primary role? So are you a researcher? Are you a research support staff? Are you a project manager, IT specialist, or other? So others taking the main part here. A lot of research support staff as well, IT specialists, project managers. No researchers so far. More project managers. A lot of research support staff. 35% of you are research support staff. Good. Okay, so the next question is, what is your primary domain? So are you from the social sciences? Are you from the natural sciences, engineering and technology, medical and health sciences, or humanities, or domain agnostic? Well, domain agnostic takes the lead here, I see, with 38%. Okay, it's a nice group of different domains in this session. Nice. Then we go to the next question. What is your country of residence? We'd like to know a little bit where you're from, as the RDA community is a global community. The United Kingdom, Canada, USA, Germany, South Africa, Germany, UK, Sweden, Denmark, Italy, expat in UK, the Netherlands, Germany. Okay, European and US and Canada. Nice. Okay, then we go to the next question. What is one question or issue related to data identification, storage, and preservation and RDA outputs that you would like to learn more about today? So this is also one way of asking your question that you have later for the presentations that are coming up. So you don't have questions yet, so maybe we can start with the presentations, and you have your opportunity then to ask the question. So while we are switching presentation mode to Chris, I will file formats for preservation and how to do dynamic data citation. Good. Thanks. So I'll stop the poll. Chris, I'll make you presenter and I'll briefly present you. So Chris is the director of the CCCA data center in Vienna. So he has more than 10 years professional experience for data infrastructure and interoperability. He has in-depth knowledge about architecture of Inspire and in the field of semantic mapping, transformation, and web-based services. And he started in February 2015 at the CCCA data center and is responsible for setting up the data infrastructure and services. So Chris, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Marike, for the introduction, and good afternoon, good morning to the audience, and it's nice to have this opportunity to be a part of this RDA Adoption Week, and these events. And I will talk a little bit about the technical implementation and development of the CCI data center, the role of RDA, and also its knowledge transfer. Of course, also our plans and next step for the evolution on the implemented dynamic data citation service here in Austria. So with the title, the scalable dynamic data citation methodology. So I will do not go so much deep into the technical implementation. So more a little bit talk about this, our experience, what we made. But nevertheless, if you want to have a technical question and also discussion, so I'm available. CCCA, Marika mentioned it, is an abbreviation or stands for Climate Change Center Austria. The CCCA is a non-profit association for Austrian research institutions and universities, which deals within the scientific domain of climate change. One department of CCCA is the data center as part of the Austrian research data infrastructure, and it was established to set up in 2015. And we promote and want to we promote with our services the interoperability in the technical sense regarding fair data principles, but also other standards like ISO, OGC, and with our service offer, we want to support the collaboration between different science and scientific and research communities. Sorry. Yeah, we feel in the end our services and our background is to feel responsible for better data access and reuse of reproducible results and data preservation, processing and analysis, as well as to provide support to domain-tailored data management, the data lifecycle, and also to set up some modules and software developments to keep and get this data provenance as concept. We focus with our server infrastructure on NetCDF. NetCDF is a quite common data format environment for this climatological domain. Data are visualized by our web services we provide, but as user, you're also able to get information direct on the point, not only on this large spatial scale. And our scope is not only Austria, we have also some global and atmospheric data here, but really to the up to the range on the local scale and high resolution scale. So these climate models mostly are products from directly from scientific collaboration. So, but in this this collaboration has also some consequences. It means we have a lot of dependencies between the different level of data products and also calculated and modeled results. Just an example here as a kind of picture how it works and how this climate domain is used to work and process data and data results. The question as operator like me is how to keep all this information about this process chain, about the lineage, and in the end, what we named in a scientific way is the data provenance. How to keep information for a clear data provenance. Here I want to have a short list. So on this adoption line, what we did. I started I moved it to Vienna. I started in 2015 to set up or to be responsible for this data center here. And also at this time I came to contact with Andreas Rauber. He's also from Vienna, and to discuss a little bit about proper data management and also his experience about identifier management. At the same time, the RDA working group on data citation almost finished this recommendation on the data citation of evolving data and data fragments. So that's why also the name dynamic. And from the beginning, I was quite convinced about this concept and this recommendation here. You can see it also in the figure, this 14 recommendation on how to keep this data citation in a proper implementation. And yeah, we published this concept in a design and implementation study also as RDA. Pilot at this time, and in summer 2017 we celebrated the first release of this dynamic data citation service within an RDA webinar, and also in the following time we came into this RDA adoption program. So here's one rough sketch about our problem or issue, what we want to solve. To align a persistent identifier to data and combine this with meta information. Also, with versioning is one task, but not as simple than it looks like. And also working with large files like these show data cubes here is often not so efficient. Normally, the user creates a kind of subset and data fragment and save this on his own desk or own infrastructure environment. And if you want to share this data fragment, so in most cases it happens really physically. The alternative is, of course, if you want to share this, is to share also these arguments from which this fragment have been created, like this, like a bounding box, or this spatial extension, and perhaps also a time frame and so on. Thinking this option a little bit further, if you want to share this fragment, you can also republish this data fragment in a data portal. But how to ensure that you describe exactly describe exactly the correct meta information of these data fragments, like credits, authorship, and so on, and also these versions. There's a kind of uncertainty, of course, if you have to do it manually. And in this use case, there is no consideration made if the origin data was corrected or get a new version. So what will happen with this fragments here, like the blue cube I showed here. And also these arguments or this text comes directly from RDA, from the RDA working group, and it shows and it describes really at the point that research data is dynamic, and we have to identify precisely the data at a specific point of time, and also want to describe precisely this process of subsetting. And also in this picture here, you can see how it works, the graphical user interface. In the end, you have to choose a climatological parameter, like temperature or something else. Choose the area of interest, and also you have a possibility to choose the time range. And the second step of this is that the data are or this subset is republished, and the smart thing and the smart idea which comes from RDA, from this working group, is really that we working only on arguments and the which is saved or stored in a query store, and the queries where with the queries you can execute the subsetting process again to get exactly this data fragment what you want to provide and what you want to share. And for us, using this subset service, for us it's just a matter of implementation to keep all information and meta information from the origin data set, and keep all these relation versions and so on. Yeah, for detailed description, we also got this opportunity to make some publication on this service. So just a few, and here are also some pictures about this what we described within RDA, and we were supported also from the RDA Europe group to promote these results and also this service in different stories, and also these adoption story cards. So and our future plan is really that we want to extend our service also to other to further scientific domain. Here's one example. It's just a case or a use case draft with the Earth Observation Data Center. This is also an Austrian institution which deals with this European Sentinel data as a data archive, and we are thinking how to how to set up our ideas on data citation directly to other data sources. And the reason was really in the end, Austria is quite little, and also our community is not so big. We were looking really to extend our user community, and yeah, and also with this smart concept to establish this service without redundant storage and redundant data collection. So we are really thinking to create an quite broad software tool regarding this OpenEO scripts, and also standardized queries and catalog services. Yeah, to extend also this idea for a broader community. Yeah, and one thing it's also for us quite fancy is and I put it here a little bit so, or described it here, is also this, from my perspective, the high potential of this open data cube initiative. So, yeah, it was a short view and a short introduction on our work. If you have any question and further question, please, I'm here and available. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. That was very nice. I don't know if there's any questions. I can't see any questions yet in the question box. So you can put your questions in the lower bottom of the GoToWebinar interface. But you can also raise your hand, and we can then unmute you, so you can ask your question live. So maybe there were there was a question on the Slido earlier, Chris. So there was a question about the file formats for preservation. Can you say something about that?
Yes, our idea behind and also it was also a consequence of from the beginning. So the first idea was really to to establish an infrastructure and also a repository with a broad range and heterogeneous data character. But in the end, we really focused on this netcdf domain and the climatological domain. Yeah, it's of course it's a little bit limited range from this perspective, but I think for this we are quite successful, and also with this Open Data Cube initiatives and solution, there's a lot of potential, because also this architecture is also based on netcdf as transformation or format to transfer the data from one point to another.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if this is if you need to know more. The person that asked this question on Slido, if you want to know more, please raise your hand and we can unmute you. Otherwise, I suggest we move to the next presentation. Thank you, Chris. Thanks very much. So Hervé, I'm going to make you presenter, and then I'll briefly present you. So. Okay, so Hervé L'Hours is the Repository and Preservation Manager in the Digital Preservation Systems and Security team in the UK Data Archive. He works on repository support and maturity models for trust and fair within FAIR's FAIR, the European project, and on related work within SSHOC, the Social Sciences and Humanities Open Cloud project. He worked on the UK Data Archive's test audit against the ISO 16363 standard for trustworthy repositories, and is current vice chair of the CoreTrustSeal and past chair of the Data Seal of Approval. Hervé, the floor is yours.
Hi everybody, thank you very much for the opportunity to join you here and show our adoption week from the SSHOC perspective. Okay, as long as we can all see the right one there. So yeah, SSHOC is the Social Science and Humanities Open Cloud project. We adopted an RDA recommendation fairly early in the process. We needed that because the organization is spread across 6 European research infrastructures and partners from the SSH domain, some developing and some more established. And these partners have got about 40 months to move from disciplinary silos and separate facilities into a more integrated, more cloud-based network of interconnected data infrastructures. There are a wide range of partners involved across this, as there are on several of the current EU projects. And one of the major challenges there is that for each of these infrastructures, we've got a repository trust and quality challenge, probably. And while this is all social science and humanities, it's fair to say that there's a really huge range of different data types in play here, a lot of different dependencies, from the social sciences to language data, arts and humanities, cultural and natural heritage as well. And across all these groups, we're looking for a common approach to assessing these infrastructures. And in terms of infrastructures, we're not just purely talking about the European entity, but also, the people, the processes, and the technologies, and how they interact to deliver repository services. So we're seeking kind of evaluation against some set of agreed requirements. It's a pretty wide-ranging project on SSHOC, as it would have to be to bring together this disparate group of people. We are talking today from the perspective of the Governance, Sustainability and Quality Assurance group. And which recommendation did we select and why? It's the CoreTrustSeal Trusted Digital Repository Requirements. Within the recommendation world, within RDA, these are called the Repository Audit and Certification Catalogues, which was the original deliverable of a Data Seal of Approval and World Data System Partnership Working Group on audit and certification. And that falls under the existing interest group of certification of digital repositories. So why did we take this approach? I think it's fair to say that the core in CoreTrustSeal was an important area to consider. There was a very low barrier to entry. It was commonly applicable across all of the different partners. The standard itself has been community developed and remains community managed. And it was recommended to us, both directly by different people involved in the European Open Science Cloud. It's a key component in the Turning Fair Data into Reality report, and it links alongside recommendations like those from Science Europe about the selection of domain repositories for deposit. And the other reason for selection was that we're looking for something which would also be responsive to community feedback, as we knew that we'd be discovering a lot of interesting things about the different partners during the course of the process. Now, the CoreTrustSeal is based around 16 requirements. They cover the areas of organizational infrastructure, digital object management, and technology. There's no rapid way of covering all 16 of these, as you can imagine, but I'm happy to answer any questions that may arise about individual requirements. So our adoption process. Within SSHOC Task 8.2, we're looking to support different applicants in reaching their certification goals. The first of those goals might simply be a self-assessment against the CoreTrustSeal itself. We are very aware that not everyone's ready to certify. We're also aware that, and we know from experience, that CoreTrustSeal is quite often a really good tool for internal organizational conversation. You can have both kind of horizontal and vertical conversations up and down your organization based around these 16 requirements. We will be supporting people directly in achieving the CoreTrustSeal, and there's over 30 certified centers within the partnerships who've already got CoreTrustSeal, and we will be supporting them in the renewal process as well. The standard itself is dynamic, as is the process. So, while we're doing that, we're taking a number of fairly flexible approaches to respond to the different types of applicant and the different audiences. We'll be doing a lot of engagement and awareness raising, looking at the benefits of certification, taking different approaches to the self-assessment process, supporting people in defining what sort of evidence they need. We'll be running a number of workshops and webinars on repository certification. We'll do events targeted at each different community within the project, but they will be open to all. And we will do SSHOC internal reviews of self-assessments before submission to CoreTrustSeal. Now, these will be confidential, at least during the process, but we'll share as much as humanly possible about those, and we'll share the wider guidance that we offer as well. The CoreTrustSeal process itself, after making an application, a self-assessment against the 16 requirements is submitted to the CoreTrustSeal. 2 reviewers are assigned to the application. The peer review process is then reported in for a full board review. The board decision is either to request revisions against the requirements and the evidence, or to approve the CoreTrustSeal and award the CoreTrustSeal. Within SSHOC, we're kind of inserting ourselves at this part of the process, looking to engage during the self-assessment process and prior to submission. Hopefully this will also help reduce the overall impact to CoreTrustSeal of all these applicants as we go for a generalized community consensus on evidence. So what are the benefits and the impact of our adoption? I think part of this is that this goes beyond the formal certification model. We know that self-assessment improves internal communication and understanding of these different issues. It's very easy, even within an organization, to be siloed and not quite realize how our outputs affect others' inputs. So it facilitates comparison with peers. There is a public statement at the end of this. It is the most detailed public statement probably available about the fellow repository. There's plenty to learn there from that body of evidence. But also, as we become more dependent on a complex range of partners, it does support cooperation with our partners, interoperability in sort of fair data terms. And also it feeds back into data quality and process improvements after a self-assessment or a certification has been applied. Kind of continuous improvement is part of the model that we're looking to support. And I think it's important to say that it goes beyond the obvious candidates for CoreTrustSeal. There are a wide variety of potential applications of the requirements well beyond traditional repositories. Throughout SSHOC, with our wide range of partners, we will be identifying cases where one particular organization would say, well, this requirement is not applicable to me, why that is the case, and we will be feeding that back into the CoreTrustSeal review process. So where are the benefits? Well, the first one is that feedback into the CoreTrustSeal, partially to better support repositories themselves, but also the wider infrastructure actors. The European Open Science Cloud is kind of just one example of support services and service aggregation and defragmentation across different bits of scientific infrastructure. We're a lot more dependent on different people than we were before, and we need wider support for that. There's also active CoreTrustSeal engagement. They've agreed to work with a wider variety of candidates to see what they need out of audit and certification. These include general purpose kind of galleries, libraries, archives, and museums, looking at that complex partnership model that I mentioned just now, which I think more and more providers are relying on. And also, one of those complex partners is often a technical infrastructure service provider. So how does the interaction between the repository and those technical service providers work? So we've got a very varied set of SSHOC applicants. That should inform kind of wider data stewardship support, the different elements that we need to have in place at the SSHOC level and at the European Open Science Cloud level. And one of the major outcomes of this is we're looking for kind of a sustainable cross social science and humanities, ERIC, support work, something that's got a life beyond the project as well. So where are those lessons learned? I think we've seen so far that the CoreTrustSeal is pretty flexible, it's broadly applicable. Even those that don't identify as traditional applicants do see the relevance in the requirements. And all of the actors in these partnerships that we're looking at and we're working with in SSHOC are critical EOS components and all need some level of standards compliance. So some of them are potential trustworthy digital repositories and some are more supporting data service providers. The other thing we've learned is kind of the CoreTrustSeal has got a very strong ethos of transparency. After a confidential review, the evidence statements and links to all the evidence are perfectly public after an approved CoreTrustSeal is awarded. So on the SSHOC project, we'll be sharing information wherever possible. We'll be applying it to a wide range of data stewards, and we'll be sharing a gap analysis as to where the current version of the CoreTrustSeal does or doesn't meet the needs of the community. I'll just finish on a note about our support for repository certification. There's a bit.ly link here, which will take people to kind of the terms and conditions of who we can support and how. So if you'd like to contact us and ask for anything else, and there's a direct contact list on the SSHOC website for any more direct questions that you've got related to SSHOC itself or to our adoption of the CoreTrustSeal. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Hervé. Thanks very much. Are there any questions for Hervé on the adoption story of the CoreTrustSeal? Maybe an application to your own organization, some questions you have. You can do that through the question box below or raising your hands. I can't see. Bridget, can you see any hands raised or any questions?
No, I'm keeping an eye on the audience, but no hands raised so far.
I'll jump in on the last one if you like, then.
Sorry?
I'll jump in on the last one if you like, though, about preservation formats.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
It's something that's come up with us recently. I think it's really worth looking at the Library of Congress's list. I think they're planning a new release relatively soon. But it's a discussion that we've had internally on SSHOC and in CoreTrustSeal as well. So really, there is no one answer for everyone, but we are looking for kind of really stable preservation formats, which kind of will last the test of time. But the CoreTrustSeal is very focused on serving your community as well. So the major focus there is to make sure that that preservation format is also easily transformable over time into formats which are sort of good dissemination and use formats, reuse formats in kind of fair data terms. So those are the two, you've got to balance those two priorities there between sort of sustainable preservation formats and easy transform into user-friendly stuff as well.
I also have a question. So typically, how long would such a process take for certification for an individual, for a repository?
It's a really interesting question because we hear a range of different answers. I was told on a call with the National Science Foundation in the States just a couple of days ago, they said, oh, well, we looked at this in July, but we didn't really get around to it until November. So we pulled all our stuff together in November, which is quite good. We've seen more people doing renewals at 2 weeks, but maybe looking at a month or so for their initial application. But there are a couple of key issues here. One of which is the types of data. The expectations will be higher for an organization looking after sensitive data of some kind or another, for instance. So that's probably worth considering in your preparation. But I know that the intention of CoreTrustSeal is that the evidence that is requested should be what the community has said over 10 years and across 2 standards. What kind of information you need to run a quality service on a day-to-day basis, and to make sure that your organization is sustainable over time, because organizational sustainability is a dependency for preservation of the object itself. So if you can deliver a good evidence base to do that and you manage it over time, I would say that if you haven't got that information to hand, certification is not your biggest problem. Running a good, stable service with a stable organization should probably be your priority. And once you're happy you're doing that, it's a question of coming up with evidence statements that you're happy to have made public, and quite often tidying up some of that internal documentation, which isn't always as publicly friendly as we might like. That's probably where the additional effort would take. And then we always urge people to keep that evidence managed over time, because there's a renewal every 3 years. So if you've been actively managing that evidence and using it to run your business for 3 years, a renewal against the CoreTrustSeal is relatively simple.
Thanks. Are there any hands raised for questions? Can't see any. Okay. I have one additional question, because you just asked about sensitive data. You just told us that it's more complicated for organizations with sensitive data. Are there any other, because we have a wide range of different domains on the call, are there any, in your role in CoreTrustSeal, have you seen any other domain-specific challenges around certification?
So we've all got, I think the CoreTrustSeal tries to stay core, yeah? So if you can demonstrate that you know and understand a designated community of users, those who should be able to understand your work, I mean, the initial focus is on domain repositories. And that's the main thing that the reviewer is looking for. Now, you'll be expected to have the basics in place, like persistent identifiers, that kind of thing. But other than that, if you can demonstrate that you are meeting the demand of that designated community, meeting those needs, that is usually sufficient. And while we've had some feedback that says, well, my domain is very different and special, usually we can work out during the review process how to make that more kind of generally applicable. The reason I raised the sensitive data issue is obviously under GDPR and with kind of, you know, greater use of kind of human data or other sensitive data as well. The reviewers have felt over time that it's important to take a slightly more rigorous approach to those data because there are key information security issues. But other than that, CoreTrustSeal does strive to be relatively domain agnostic, and it's part of the review process for the applicant to demonstrate what their users need and how they deliver what is required. I suppose one example of a more rigorous requirement, so on the Fair's Fair project, we're looking at how you might be CoreTrustSeal plus Fair, for instance. That might be a more rigorous set of requirements around a specific set of indicators, or you might have a set of national characteristics which would go beyond the CoreTrustSeal, or I suppose openness is another area where you might have kind of local requirements to meet more specific and rigorous standards. But the general CoreTrustSeal process is looking for you to demonstrate that you fulfill a mission of delivering access and long-term preservation from a sustainable organization for a clear designated community of users. If you can demonstrate that, you're probably onto a winner. So.
Okay, thanks. So now, without any further ado, we move to the next presentation. So thank you, Hervé. Caterina, I will make you presenter, and I'll briefly present you.
Thank you.
So, okay. So Caterina Caracciolo works to improve the interoperability of statistical data in the area of agriculture. Her work deals with semantic technologies, including vocabularies, taxonomies, and ontologies. And for the past 13 years, she has worked as an information specialist at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, previously engaged with the development and maintenance of vocabulary for textual information, AgroVoc. She's now focusing on classifications for statistical data, and Caterina is one of the 14 RDA ambassadors. The floor is yours, Caterina.
Okay, thank you, Marike. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Give me a second. Yes. Yes, today I will tell you something about the adoption of the an RDA output in FAO, the Statistics Division. And the output is from the Agri-Semantics Working Group. It's about hints to facilitate the use of semantics for data in agriculture. A couple of words about FAO. It's a UN agency. The goal is food security. It's active in both policy and data collection and analysis and dissemination. You can, for example, take a look at FAOStat. The one is the major platform for statistical data. Headquarters is in Rome, and there are national and regional offices around the world. So FAO has been involved in RDA from the very beginning. To mention the Agricultural Data Interest Group, Agri-Semantics Working Group, the Fisheries Data Interoperability Working Group, and the WIT data. When it goes to agri-semantics, the focus of the working group was on semantic interoperability. So that means not only interoperability at the level of protocols or data format, but really at the level of the interpretation of the data, what the data actually mean. which is usually done through, like regularly done through a variety of resources, going from vocabularies, controlled vocabularies, thesauri, or up to ontologies. Summarizing, the focus of the agri-semantics and the outputs were on tools, with a special emphasis on achieving a generic web framework to enable the collaboration when working with semantic resources. The other focus was on the use and reuse of semantic resources and the adoption of standards. And something that was very relevant to us in FAO was the fact that the entire life cycle was covered, and that the various user profiles involved was also considered. So the question is why agri-semantics is relevant to agricultural statistics. The fact is that the statistical data heavily relies on classifications. Obviously, when you collect data on production of wheat, for example, you have to have a notion of wheat, and usually codes are used for management in information system. And so this importance goes from the collection, the use, the analysis, and then further on with the integration of data with, for example, third parties data. But while statistical data is undergoing an important effort towards modernization in tools for collecting data, for example, or also in format for transmission, statistical classifications lag behind, and they are usually treated like in an ad hoc manner, like a variety of formats, non-standard. So in the end, their interoperability is seriously hampered. It takes a long time to work with them. And the good thing from our point of view is that agri-semantics recommendations offer this a global view, like a comprehensive view on what to consider to make them better. To give you a feeling for what we are talking about, this is like a table, like typical answer result from a query to a statistical database. This is a yield of wheat in a couple of countries. You'll see the areas. These are so the countries the data refer to go together with codes. That's exactly the content of statistical classification, so terminological and coding content. And you see also some more wheat as an item and a corresponding code. So this is one big part of the adoption story I'm telling you today. And the other big part is the correspondences between classifications. So this is in green are the codes from one classification. You will see it's the same one used in the table, which actually it's established to correspond to these other codes in the other classifications. And this is like a bread and butter for statisticians all the time. They always have the problem of converting data from one classification to the other. So in the end, what it all boils down to is that words as ambiguous are ambiguous, and codes too. Classical example is Turkey, but also codes like 1079, they both can be like Turkish, again, from one classification, or something else, like manufacturing of food. These are real examples. So the adoption of the agri-semantics output in FAO happens is taking place in the statistics divisions, and in the specific project called Caliper is a web platform specifically dedicated to statistical classification. So what's the benefit to FAO? The expected benefit is to have a single platform to manage this type of metadata, statistical classification, in open and interoperable formats, while supporting all steps, all phases in the life cycle, from maintenance, publication, and use in information systems, and at the same time produce public goods, because all this will be made available for the public. Ultimately, the goal is to have better statistics, and so to have statistics that are more timely, that higher quality, and especially better comparable. And now here a note of caution, because the platform is not yet an official service of FAO. So you'll see the data, you can access all data published there, but you'll need login and password I'm giving you in the presentation. You can test, give feedback, but please do not use the data as a reference. So this is the like entry page, the home page of Caliper. These are the credentials. In just a few words, Caliper is an aggregator of resources. So all resources are published and created by somebody else, so classifications and their mappings. The key thing is that it's based on semantic technologies, open standards, and addresses user, both humans and machines. So out of the items, the suggestions and recommendations from Agri-Semantics, I highlight the 3 main blocks. One is about the standard modeling and formats. So basically, it's mostly RDF technology stack with together with standard vocabulary. So the basic data model is uses COS. XCOS is a specific, like an extension of SCOS for statistical classifications. And something that is very new to this domain is the use of URIs for both items, classification items, and entire classification. The reuse of common metadata models, including also versioning and provenance information that are all machine readable, and the use of and the final output that is a web-based platform, and all based on open source tools and open licenses. The coverage, we have classification on activities, aid flows, so it's all about investment or aid, like financial aid to agriculture, crops, forestry, geography, geographical areas, and nutrition, products, general products and agricultural products, and soil. Want to highlight, as I said, we have like all items are given different, like they have their own URIs with all data, corresponding data attached. Now, if you take this URI is resolved, so if you take them and pass them in your browser, you will see the a visualization of what data is actually there available for machines and humans. Common metadata models are very important for use information systems, and also for human credibility, so to speak. Because in this case, it's very important to distinguish the, let's say, the intellectual content of classification, so the authors and versions and so on about the of the original classifications from the metadata that pertains to the RDF, say the object distributor. Open source tools and the platform. Here, if you're curious, the names, some of the tools we use for visualizations: Cosmos, the actual Drupal content management system, GMKI, Workbench. It's a well-known editor, web-based editor for RDF and OWL, and we're working towards better integration. So, like the final objective is to have all these tools nicely integrated in one single platform. So now a look at the future of this initiative is we are already in a collaboration with Eurostat, who's also interested in providing this sort of improved, better way to provide classifications, more interoperable. So the idea being that each adopt this framework and distribute and access classifications from the other in the same way. And in the future, this could be extended to a larger network. So there could be other classifications, custodians, so maintainers, and users that connect to others. Let's see. So this concludes my presentation. I kept it brief, but one more slide for the contacts and something that you might find interesting. This is like it just arrived yesterday. It's a survey from Godan, from the Initiative for Open Data, Agriculture and Nutrition, about the use, opinions, and attitudes about semantic resources in agricultural data. So I go back to the slide with the contact, and happy to have your questions.
Thank you, Caterina. It was very nice. Can I see if there's any questions? I can't see any questions. If you want to ask Caterina a question, now is your chance. So raise your hand or post the question in the question box. Bridget, can you see any questions?
No hands raised either.
Okay, Caterina, I do have a question.
Yeah.
I do. So the output that you have, the recommendation that you have adopted, it talks about 39 hints. Did FAO adopt work with all the 39 hints, or were there some specific ones that were more applicable to FAO than others?
Yeah, we made a long table that, like I thought I was sparing you for the presentation. We touched on most of them, although I think the group that was most relevant was a group on of recommendations for semantic experts. So yeah, I think that's the name of the type of users, because a big part of this adoption of this effort was on moving from the traditional formats, like mostly table-based, into a graph-based, so moving into the RDF technology stack. So that is basically the technologies that allow you to have data on the web with URIs, and to have to specify the semantics when it's the semantics of the item described, including the classifications, modeling. Yeah, I believe that's a big part. And of course, the other big part is about the tools. It was also a big move from proprietary formats, proprietary software, to move into the world of open source and open formats. And also the fact that this attention to user skills and expertise was also very important. So the fact that different visualizations are needed for different, depending on the task and depending on the profile or the type of user that is. This may seem trivial, but actually is not, because this it's often the case that tools accommodate only one type of user, typically expert user. Yeah, and the other thing is, like, as a general framework, that these tools should, the life cycle shouldn't be just a pipeline, a fragmented set of tasks, but they should be supported in a more organic way.
Thank you. Okay, if there are no further questions, we are a little bit over time. I would like to...
Marika, we do have one question came in from Marco Brandisi. I've also posted it into the panelist chat. It's for Caterina, so you should be able to read it there, but I can read it out as well.
Yeah,
thank you.
Okay, so this is from Marco Brandisi. He's asking, do you think linked data world is going in new directions? For example, simple schema languages like schema.org, simpler syntaxes, JSON-LD, knowledge graph databases instead of triple stores, APIs, and GraphQL instead of SparkQL?
I think so. Actually, I believe the two lines are sort of evolving together. For example, the like we link with Caliper, we use schema.org and also Wikidata, for example. So while for the official statistics is more like the word of REST API, is more complex thing. JSON, I see you mentioned JSON LT. That's also a format of distribution for the classification. This was totally new because the standard format was XLS, CSV, Sparkle. Yeah. So in short, I think it is going into like a new direction that is, in a way, it's more affordable also to various type of users, but the two lines keep moving on together.
Thank you. Thank you, Caterina, very much for your presentation and your explanations. Before we close the webinar, I would like to point the audience to two initiatives within RDA related to adoption and adoption stories. I'll briefly
I will
the presentation mode.
close my camera and say
okay.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Caterina. Let me see if I can put this again in presentation mode. So what we would like to show you is that if you are an adopter, if you are on the call, and if you have adopted RDA recommendations or outputs, we're very curious to hear about your story, to share the story, and to in this way foster adoption further in RDA in the community. I see it's paused. Is that correct, Bridget?
Yeah, I can't see anything. It's just a blank. There it is. You're okay now.
It is there? Okay, perfect. So so please go to the RDA website. There you'll find the RDA adoption web form to tell your story. And then another initiative is the RDA Europe 4 project has funds available for the publication of 30 articles, of up to 30 articles in the CoreTrustSeal Data Science Journal, a special collection on RDA. There's still some funds available. We're looking for research and practice papers. The deadline is the 17th of July, and we're really looking forward to see more papers coming in there. So with this, I would like to thank you all for being on this webinar and engage with RDA, with our speakers, and learn about our adoption stories. Thank you very much. Thanks also, Bridget, for being on the call with us. Have a very nice day, and look forward to see you in more RDA Adoption Week sessions. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you all speakers as well.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.